Copper Creek Courtship by Audrey Sinclair. The stagecoach lurched violently to one side, and Miss Catherine Hartwell pressed her gloved hands against the worn leather seat to steady herself. Through the dust-clouded window, she caught glimpses of the rugged Colorado Territory landscape, towering mesas, scattered pines, and endless sky that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of civilization itself. "First time west of the Mississippi, miss?" asked the elderly gentleman seated across from her, his weathered face creased with kindness. "Indeed it is, Mr. Whitmore." Catherine smoothed her navy traveling dress, acutely aware of how impractical her Boston attire would prove in this untamed land. "I confess I'm both terrified and exhilarated." The truth was far more complicated. 3 months ago, she had been Miss Catherine Hartwell of Beacon Hill, engaged to the respectable but utterly dull Mr. Reginald Pemberton. Then came the letter that changed everything, a correspondence from her late uncle's solicitor informing her that she had inherited a small property in the mining town of Copper Creek, Colorado. More shocking still, the inheritance came with a peculiar condition: she must reside on the property for 6 months to claim it fully. When she announced her intention to travel west, her family had been scandalized. Her mother had taken to her bed with the vapors, and Reginald had issued an ultimatum: marry him immediately or consider their engagement terminated. Catherine had surprised everyone, including herself, by choosing Colorado. The stagecoach shuddered to a halt, and Catherine's stomach dropped as she realized they had reached their destination. Copper Creek appeared to be little more than a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the mountainside, with a main street that looked as though it had been carved from the earth itself. "End of the line, folks," called the driver. "Copper Creek." Catherine gathered her reticule and carpetbag, accepting Mr. Whitmore's assistance as she stepped down into the dusty street. The thin mountain air caught in her throat, and she blinked against the brilliant afternoon sun. "Miss Hartwell." A deep voice spoke her name with a slight drawl that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She turned to find a tall man approaching, his dark hair tousled by the wind and his clothes practical rather than fashionable. He wore a simple white shirt rolled to the elbows, dark trousers, and boots that had clearly seen considerable use. What struck her most forcefully, however, were his eyes, a striking blue-gray that seemed to hold both warmth and wariness. "I am she," Catherine replied, extending her hand with the propriety her Boston upbringing demanded. "Samuel Morrison," he said, accepting her hand with a firm grip. "I've been looking after your uncle's place since his passing. I run the general store here in town." "Mr. Morrison." Catherine found herself reluctant to release his hand, a most improper reaction that brought color to her cheeks. "I cannot adequately express my gratitude for your kindness." "No need for gratitude. Your uncle was a good man who helped establish this town. It's the least I could do." Samuel's gaze swept over her traveling costume with what might have been amusement, though I suspect you might find Colorado a bit different from what you're accustomed to. Catherine lifted her chin, a gesture that had served her well in Boston drawing rooms. "I am more adaptable than my appearance might suggest, Mr. Morrison." Something flickered in those blue-gray eyes, respect perhaps, or challenge. "I hope so, Miss Hartwell. Come, I'll show you to your uncle's cabin." As they walked through the town, Catherine observed the bustling activity around them. Men in rough clothes emerged from what she assumed were mines, their faces darkened with coal dust. Women in practical dresses hurried about their business, their skirts raised to avoid the omnipresent dust. Children played in the street, their laughter echoing off the mountain walls. "It's smaller than I expected," Catherine admitted. "But growing every day. The silver mine's been good to Copper Creek, though mining towns can be volatile." Samuel glanced at her sideways. "Are you certain you want to stay? 6 months is a long time to be away from civilization." Catherine bristled at the implication. "I assure you, Mr. Morrison, I am quite capable of managing my own affairs. I did not travel 1,500 miles to be frightened away by a little dust and inconvenience." "I meant no offense," Samuel said, though she detected a hint of a smile. "It's just that most Eastern ladies find the adjustment challenging." "Then perhaps you have been acquainted with the wrong sort of Eastern ladies." This time Samuel's smile was unmistakable. "Perhaps I have." They stopped before a small but well-built log cabin nestled against a grove of aspen trees. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the windows gleamed with recent cleaning. "I took the liberty of having Mrs. Patterson, she runs the boarding house, prepare the place for your arrival. There's firewood stacked, provisions in the pantry, and fresh linens on the bed." Catherine felt a surge of gratitude that she struggled to contain. "You have been far too kind, Mr. Morrison. I fear I shall never be able to repay such thoughtfulness." Your uncle would have expected no less. Samuel handed her a key, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. "If you need anything at all, my store is just down the main street. I live in the rooms above it." As he turned to leave, Catherine found herself speaking before she could consider the propriety of her words. "Mr. Morrison, would you care to join me for tea? I realize I have no proper service, but I did pack a small traveling set, and I would welcome the company." Samuel paused, his expression unreadable. "I wouldn't want to impose on your first day." "It would be no imposition. Indeed, it would be a kindness to a stranger in unfamiliar surroundings." After a moment's hesitation, Samuel nodded. "I'd be honored, Miss Hartwell." Catherine surprised herself by how pleased she felt at his acceptance. As she prepared tea with the simple supplies available, she found herself studying Samuel Morrison from beneath her lashes. He was certainly unlike any gentleman of her acquaintance. There was something direct and honest about him, something that spoke of competence and reliability. When he smiled, which he did often during their conversation, her pulse quickened in a most unseemly manner. "Tell me about my uncle," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "I'm afraid I knew very little about his life here." Thomas Hartwell was one of the first to settle in Copper Creek. He helped establish the school and was instrumental in bringing the territorial judge here twice a year. He was a gentleman in the truest sense of the word. "He never married?" "No. He often spoke of a woman back east, but said she couldn't see herself in the wilderness. I gathered it was a source of some regret." Catherine felt a pang of sympathy for her uncle. How lonely he must have been, building a life in this remote place without the comfort of love or family. "And you, Mr. Morrison, are you married?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Catherine felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Such directness was entirely inappropriate. "No, Miss Hartwell. I'm not." Samuel's voice was quiet, and something in his tone suggested the topic was not entirely comfortable. "I came here 5 years ago to start fresh, and I've been focused on building the business." "Starting fresh?" Catherine ventured, then immediately regretted her curiosity. "Forgive me, that was presumptuous." "Not at all. I was engaged back in Missouri. My fiancée decided she preferred my business partner to me. They married a month after I left." Samuel's smile was rueful. "Perhaps we both understand something about the complications of engagement." Catherine looked up sharply. "How could you possibly know about my circumstances?" "Small town, Miss Hartwell. News travels fast, and your uncle's lawyer mentioned you'd broken an engagement to come here. I hope I haven't overstepped." "No, you haven't." Catherine found herself wanting to explain, to make him understand that her decision hadn't been made lightly. "Reginald, Mr. Pemberton, is a perfectly respectable man. He would have provided a comfortable life, a secure future. But when I received word of my inheritance, I realized I had been settling for security rather than truly living. And now I'm sitting in a log cabin in Colorado Territory, having tea with a man I met an hour ago, and I feel more alive than I have in years." The confession hung in the air between them, and Catherine was mortified by her boldness. But Samuel's expression softened, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I'm glad you came, Miss Hartwell. Copper Creek has a way of showing people what they're truly made of." Over the following weeks, Catherine threw herself into the challenge of frontier life with a determination that surprised even her. She learned to manage the wood-burning stove, to tend a small garden, and to navigate the social complexities of a mining town. The women of Copper Creek were initially skeptical of the Eastern lady in their midst, but Catherine's genuine interest in their lives and her willingness to work alongside them gradually won their acceptance. Samuel Morrison proved to be a constant source of assistance and increasingly companionship. He taught her to drive the small wagon that came with the property, showed her which plants were edible and which were dangerous, and gradually introduced her to the rhythms of frontier life. Their initial formal politeness evolved into easy friendship, and Catherine found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that would have shocked her Boston acquaintances. "You're becoming quite the frontier woman," Samuel observed one afternoon as he watched her expertly manage a batch of sourdough bread. "Mrs. Patterson said you helped deliver the Thompson baby last week." Catherine wiped flour from her hands, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at his approval. "Mrs. Thompson needed assistance, and I was available. It seemed the natural thing to do." Natural for you, perhaps. Not every lady from Boston would have had the courage or the stomach for it. I find I'm discovering things about myself I never knew existed. Catherine glanced at him, then away. This place changes a person. Yes, it does. Samuel's voice was quiet, and when Catherine looked up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Catherine, Miss Hartwell. The urgent call from outside interrupted whatever Samuel had been about to say. Catherine hurried to the door to find young Tommy Patterson, the boarding housekeeper's son, red-faced and breathing hard. Miss Hartwell, you need to come quick. There's been an accident at the mine, and Mrs. Patterson says you're the only one who knows about nursing. Catherine's blood ran cold. What kind of accident? Cave-in. 3 men trapped, and 2 others hurt pretty bad. Please, miss, they need help. Catherine was already reaching for her shawl and the medical supplies she had assembled after the Thompson baby's birth. Samuel caught her arm as she passed. Catherine, you don't have to do this. Dr. Henley will be here from Grand Junction in 2 days. 2 days might be too late. Catherine met his gaze steadily. I have some training in nursing from my charity work in Boston. If I can help, I must. Samuel nodded slowly. Then I'm coming with you. The scene at the mine was chaos. Men covered in dirt and blood clustered around the entrance, while others worked frantically to clear debris from the collapsed tunnel. Catherine quickly assessed the 2 injured men who had been brought out, one with a badly broken leg, the other with cuts and what appeared to be a concussion. Drawing on her limited but practical experience, Catherine set to work. She cleaned wounds, improvised splints, and organized the other women to provide assistance. Samuel worked beside her, following her instructions without question and providing the physical strength she lacked. You're going to be fine, Mr. Kelly, Catherine told the man with the broken leg as she finished securing his splint. The important thing is to keep the leg immobilized until Dr. Henley arrives. Thank you, miss, Kelly gasped through gritted teeth. Don't know what we'd have done without you. It was nearly dawn when the rescue efforts finally succeeded in reaching the trapped miners. All 3 were alive, though injured, and Catherine found herself once again pressed into service. By the time Dr. Henley arrived the following evening, she had treated 7 men and earned the permanent respect of the entire community. Miss Hartwell, Dr. Henley said as he examined her work, you have a natural gift for this. Have you ever considered training as a nurse? Catherine looked up in surprise. I know I never have. Women of my background don't typically pursue such careers. Perhaps it's time to reconsider what women of your background can do. That evening, Catherine sat on her small porch, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. She had saved lives, had made a real difference in a way that her charitable work in Boston had never allowed. For the first time in her life, she felt truly useful. Samuel appeared at her gate, carrying a basket that smelled deliciously of fresh bread and stew. Mrs. Patterson thought you might be too tired to cook, he said, settling beside her on the porch steps. She's quite right. Catherine accepted the food gratefully. Though I confess I'm not certain I could sleep even if I tried. I keep thinking about those men, about how close they came to. But they didn't. They're alive because of you. Catherine shook her head. I only did what anyone would have done. No, Catherine, you did what you would have done, and that's something far more remarkable. The use of her given name, spoken with such warmth and admiration, sent a flutter through Catherine's chest. She looked at Samuel, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Samuel, she began, then stopped, uncertain how to continue. I know, he said softly. I feel it too. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, the weight of unspoken feelings settling between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Tell me about your life in Boston, Samuel said eventually. What will you go back to when your 6 months are finished? Catherine considered the question, realizing with a shock that she hadn't thought about Boston in weeks. I suppose I'll return to my parents' house. Resume my charitable work. Perhaps eventually marry someone suitable. Is that what you want? The simple question hung in the air, and Catherine found herself unable to answer immediately. 3 months ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. Now the prospect of returning to her old life felt like donning clothes that no longer fit. I don't know, she admitted. I thought I did. But now, Samuel, I've been happier these past weeks than I ever was in Boston. I feel as though I'm becoming the person I was meant to be. Then stay. The words were spoken quietly, but they hit Catherine with the force of a thunderbolt. She turned to face him fully, her eyes wide. "Stay? Marry me, Catherine. Make your life here with me." Catherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Samuel, we've only known each other a few weeks. This is all so sudden." "Is it? I feel as though I've been waiting for you my entire life." Samuel reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I know I'm not what your family would choose for you. I'm not wealthy, I don't have a title or social position. But I love you, Catherine. I love your courage, your compassion, your determination to make a difference in the world. I love the way you've embraced this life, this place, these people." Tears sprang to Catherine's eyes. "Oh, Samuel, I love you too. I think I've loved you since that first day when you showed me such kindness." "Then what's stopping you?" Catherine stood and walked to the porch railing, her mind racing. "My family, my obligations, the life I left behind. People depend on me there. And people depend on you here too. You've seen that. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? Catherine, you found your calling here? You found love? What more could you want?" Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. In Boston, she had been Catherine Hartwell, dutiful daughter, charitable lady, suitable wife-to-be. Here she was simply Catherine, a woman who had delivered babies, saved lives, and found a love that made her soul sing. "I need time to think," she said finally. "This is the most important decision of my life." Samuel nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need." But as he walked away into the darkness, Catherine felt as though she were watching her happiness disappear with him. The next 2 months passed in a blur of activity and internal struggle. Catherine threw herself into her work, helping Dr. Henley when he made his rounds, teaching the local children to read, and becoming an integral part of the community. But beneath her busy exterior, she wrestled with the choice that would define her future. Letters from Boston arrived regularly, each one a reminder of the life she had left behind. Her mother wrote of social obligations and family expectations. Friends shared news of engagements and marriages, of the comfortable, predictable rhythm of Boston society. Most painful of all was the letter from Reginald, informing her that he had waited as long as he could, but was now engaged to her cousin Margaret. "I suppose I should feel devastated," Catherine told Samuel one evening as they walked through the town. "But all I feel is relief." "Relief?" "Relief that the decision has been made for me, at least partially. I can never go back to the life I had planned, even if I wanted to." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her. "And do you want to go back?" Catherine looked around at the bustling town that had become her home, at the mountains that had become as familiar as the cobblestones of Boston, at the man who had become everything to her. "No," she said simply. "I don't." Samuel's face transformed with hope. "Catherine, does that mean?" "It means I've been a fool to hesitate for so long. Samuel Morrison, if your offer still stands, I would be honored to be your wife." The kiss that followed was everything Catherine had dreamed of and more, tender, passionate, and full of promise for the future they would build together. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the small church that the community had built, wearing a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her alter from one of her Boston gowns. The congregation was small but enthusiastic, filled with the people who had become her true family. As Samuel took her hand and they spoke their vows, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. She had come to Colorado as Miss Catherine Hartwell of Boston, running from a life that didn't fit. She was leaving as Mrs. Samuel Morrison of Copper Creek, stepping into a future that promised adventure, love, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. "I love you, Mrs. Morrison," Samuel whispered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. "And I love you, Mr. Morrison," Catherine replied, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "Thank you for showing me who I really am." As they walked down the aisle together, Catherine caught sight of the mountains through the church's simple windows. The peaks stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to the transformation of a Boston lady into a Colorado woman, a woman who had found her true calling in the most unexpected place. The reception was held in the town square, with music provided by the local fiddler, and dancing that continued well into the night. Catherine had never been happier, surrounded by the people who had welcomed her, cherished by the man who had seen her true worth from the beginning. No regrets? Samuel asked as they finally escaped to the privacy of their new home, the cabin that had been enlarged and improved over the months of their courtship. Catherine looked around at the simple but comfortable space, at the life they had built together, at the future that stretched before them full of possibility. "None whatsoever," she said, stepping into his arms. "I'm exactly where I belong." Outside, the Colorado stars shone down on Copper Creek, on the couple who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances, and on the community that had been enriched by their presence. Catherine Hartwell had come west seeking adventure and found something far more valuable: a home, a purpose, and a love that would last a lifetime. In the months that followed, Catherine established a small clinic in town, working alongside Dr. Henley to provide medical care to the growing population. Samuel's store prospered, and together they became pillars of the community, their love story becoming legend among the people of Copper Creek. Years later, when their children asked about their parents' courtship, Catherine would tell them about the day she chose love over duty, adventure over security, and the wild beauty of Colorado over the comfortable constraints of Boston society. It was, she would say, the best decision she had ever made. And in the evening, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Catherine and Samuel would sit on their porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains, grateful for the path that had brought them together and the life they had built in the shadow of the Colorado peaks.